right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for this great webinar on one of our exclusive Scrum Alliance member benefits. As everybody is joining the room, I'd love if you can hop into the attendee chat and just share where you're joining us from today. I'm highlighting it on your console in case you can't find it. But yeah, we'd love to see where people are joining us from. Oh, I know we've got a couple people from Maryland now. We have Denver, we've got Chicago, Switzerland. Oh, we're really going international. Got another Sweden. I know one of our hosts is joining us from Scandinavia, so up in the north. Germany, Vancouver, another Switzerland. This is really cool and exciting to see, guys. I'll give it another quick minute, and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Empower Your Scrum Journey, an interactive exploration of the Scrum Master Personal Improvement Tool. My name is Molly Lord, and I am a member of the team at Scrum Alliance, and I am really excited to have y'all all here with us today. So, as a Scrum Alliance member, you may already know that you are a Scrum Alliance member, and you may understand what that means, but just in case you got your certification and then started hearing from Scrum Alliance and you're not too sure who we are the oldest and largest nonprofit in the Agile and Scrum certifying space. We were established in 2001, shortly after the signing of the Agile Manifesto. And in our time as an organization, we have issued over 1,876,000 certifications across, Certified Scrum Master, Certified Scrum Product Owner, Certified Agile Leader, all of that. So we are truly a global organization. I believe we have certificates in almost every country, including some that are not officially countries. Because I think I got a list once that we were in like 300 something countries. And I was like, that's not accurate because there are only 195. But we are truly a global organization. And we exist to advance real-world agility by equipping and inspiring the change maker in everyone. Just a quick run-through of some of your Scrum Alliance member benefits. You have access to our Scrum Alliance Learning Journey, which is a specially curated collection of courses designed by our certified Scrum trainers to help you advance on your Agile journey well after leaving your certification course. You're also connected to our larger Scrum Alliance global community through our events, such as the Global Scrum Gathering, our regional Scrum gatherings, and then we have user groups across the world that are led by members of our community. In addition to that, you also get discounts if you want to attend either a regional Scrum Gathering or a global Scrum Gathering. You also have access to a couple different tools, including the Retrium Retrospective tool, as well as a nice suite of comparative agility tools, including the Comparative Agility tool, and the Scrum Master Personal Improvement Tool. And if you happen to be a dually where you have your CSM and your CSPO, you also get access to the Product Owner Personal Improvement Tool. In case you've never accessed your member benefits, if you go to the Scrum Alliance website and log in to your dashboard, you should be able to find on the left-hand menu a tab that says Benefits, and from there you can access all of your member benefits. Quickly, before I hand this over to our wonderful hosts, I'm going to give you a quick tour of the dashboard that you are looking at. If you have any questions for our speakers that come up during the webinar, or you have a technical question, please throw that in the Q&A box. I will be keeping an eye on that, and we will get to a moderated Q&A at the end of the session. Also, as you've probably seen already, we have an attendee chat. That's where you can talk to your fellow attendees, throw in your LinkedIn bio, anything you want to share there with your fellow attendees is great. And then another thing that we ask you do throughout is we have these really fun reactions. So if there's a moment that stands out to you, you love something, something makes a bell ring, just share a reaction. We are able to see that at the end and understand how our content impacted you. So without further ado, I'm going to hand this over to Jorgen.
All right. Thank you so much, Molly. That was wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Very much appreciate this opportunity. I'm so excited to be sharing, information around the Scrum Master PI, which I think is one of those sort of hidden gems, hidden treasures that I don't think enough people know about, but we're going to change that today. So this is what we're going to talk about. First, we're going to talk about how to activate this exclusive benefit. And by the way, did I mention it's free? That's kind of important too. So I'll tell you about that. Of course, Molly already gave you a little bit of an idea of how to do that. But yeah, we'll go through that again just to make sure that we know how to do it and how to get access to it. And then we'll go behind the scenes and learn more around how the Scrum Master PI was made, because this is a tool that was made for the community by the community. And we're going to meet 3 people who are actually part of the original crew who made this survey work. So I'd like to actually introduce the 3 people that are here. There are 3 out of, I think, about 28 or so who actually created the survey. If you don't mind, Renata, why don't you say hi and introduce yourself to the audience as one of the original authors of the survey.
Hey folks, I'm Renata. I'm from Brazil originally, but currently I'm living in Berlin. And at the moment, I'm working in a company called eGym. It's a very nice. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we'll definitely hear more from Renata as we go. Adil, you're next. Tell us a little bit about yourself as we get into this.
Hi, I'm Adil. I am a software engineer turned Scrum Master / Agile coach. And I came across this when I was wondering how to measure my success or failure when I turned from a software engineer to an Agile coach. And that's how our paths crossed. And it's great to see that it's serving so well over the years, and love to talk more about this.
Thank you so much, Adil. And lastly, not leastly, Alan Jackhart, you've been one of the guys who've been a dynamo from the beginning. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself as well as one of the authors?
Yes, hello, I'm Alan Jackhart. I've been working with Jorgen on the comparative agility tool for many years. I got my CSM back in 2013 and been doing various things with Scrum Alliance ever since, and excited for Jorgen to share things with everybody today around this tool, and we're going to give a little insight on how everything was made. So that's it for me.
Awesome. And you can tell already that these are great guys. These are just nice people. And that's one of the things I thought was so cool about creating this particular resource. It was all volunteers. Nobody here got paid. The tool is free. So this is not a money thing. It's really a community thing. And I think it's just a wonderful experience, and I'm just saying this with you. So we'll do a live demo later on to show you how it all works. And I think you'll like this, we're going to give you some exclusive findings. We'll look at all the data, well, at least for the last 3 or 4 years, and there's thousands and thousands of data points. And we'll go through this and say, what is the data telling us about how Scrum Masters work today? Where are they having challenges? Where are they disagreeing with each other? And where do they do really well? And I think that could be really good for us as a community to be aware of as well. So that's kind of the agenda. Of course, a Q&A at the end there also. So let's go right away to the next part. Well, you've probably seen this already, but let me just show you anyway. I'm going to actually share my screen and show you my account with the Scrum Alliance. Because yes, I am a proud CSP and also a Scrum Master. And I'll see if I can share my screen right now. Hopefully you can see it. This is the wonderful screen that the Scrum Alliance had made. This webpage was recently updated, I think, so it's working really well. What you do is you go to your dashboard here. You can see my screen, and I think you can. And once you go there, you can see that I am in need of updating my SEUs. I'm going to get one today, I think. So this is something I can do, but it doesn't expire until September, so I got some time. But click on Benefits. And once you click on benefits, that's where you'll see all the benefits that are available to you as a Scrum Master, or even as a CSPO if you are that. So that's what I have here. You can see I have my product owner improvement tool because I am a product owner, and I also am a Scrum Master. And of course, here's also the comparative agility tool. Just click on it. Once you click on this, you will see that you will have a login next. And this is where you will log in to the tool itself. Only thing you have to do is you have to create an account. If you don't have an account, you need to do that first. But it's easy to do and it doesn't take long. But just be aware of that. But that's it. That's all it takes, and then you're good to go. So we should be back again to the slides. Why don't we go and talk a little bit history? I just want to tell you how this all happened, and some of you probably remembers this very well. The Scrum Master PI was actually created a long time ago. It was formally announced that the Scrum Alliance and the Comparative Agility was working together in 2018. There was this wonderful announcement that was made. And then after that, we said, you know what? We need some volunteers. So we sent out a call for volunteers. And you could see the literal page there to the right. And 2018 was the deadline back in June. And we got a lot of people wanting to join us and help us. And it was a wonderful situation once we were able to pick out the kind of people who had the time. We also tried to make it diverse. So we didn't want just folks in Minnesota. Nothing against Minnesota, but that's where we announced it. We also wanted to make sure that this was for everyone across the world, because Scrum Alliance and Agile and Scrum is a world sport. So we had people from a lot of different time zones, all sorts of continents. And ultimately, we ended up with about 22 volunteers. Across 4 continents. So the official launch happened in October, and that's when we did the formal launch. And we went to Vienna, if you guys remember that. I'm not sure how many of you were in the Global Scrum Gathering in Vienna, but that was a great event. And that's where we formally made this announcement, and it was released to everybody. And that's really where it started. So that's the story behind it, for those who are interested in that. Now, let's talk a little bit about how it was made. And like I said, we are lucky. We do have some of the people who are actually part of this work. The process in a nutshell was looking like this. The first thing we had to do was, of course, to create the survey items. Why don't we start with that? Alan, if you don't mind, can you tell us a little bit about the process of how the heck did we decide which survey items to have in the survey itself?
Yeah. I mean, we started with a long, I guess, like a list of all kinds of different statements, different thoughts that the group had across. We just shared it in a spreadsheet, and we had, I don't know how many there were, but there was, over 100 at least, if not more. And everybody, we collaborated on the different statements, the different qualities of what we would want a Scrum Master to include. And so we gathered that for a couple weeks, or even more than that, to create a list of possible survey items across the group. And it was a really collaborative effort, and was really cool to see all the different ideas and the different things that everybody brought to the table. So that took a little while to get all those collected. But the initial state of that was pretty cool to see, all the things that came together there. And then, that helped us get on to step 2, but I'll let you move on to that when we're ready.
Yeah, and exactly. Step 2, that was the validation part. We had some help from some data scientists who helped us a little bit. But then it was also about us as a community to say, is this really valid when we think about the types of behaviors, norms, and patterns that we're looking at when we look at Scrum Masters? Adil, if you don't mind, can you say a little bit about how we discussed as a group to decide which resources, for instance, we wanted to include as part of the recommendations for all of these survey items?
I'll be honest. It's like I remember the gathering of the survey items very well, and then there was a whole lot of discussion in Slack. I remember when we were paring them down. But to your point, you'd have to help me out, Jürgen.
Yeah, no worries. And Renata, maybe you can join in as well. Part of it was, of course, to find what type of recommendations we would give. So if you scored, for instance, low on a certain statement, well, how can we help you? What kind of resource would be useful for someone who doesn't know how to do story point estimation, for instance? And one thing that I remember that I thought was really great is that we early on decided that this wasn't going to be a tool that only gave resources that was on the Scrum Alliance site. We said, let's make it open to everybody. So we actually are pointing to resources, everywhere. It's not just Scrum Alliance sites, which I think is fair. Lots of great resources on Scrum Alliance, but there's also others there too. So there was a lot of work around that. I don't know, Renata, if you want to share some of your experiences as you went through some of these resources.
Well, it's it's really been a long time, but I think a part of it was we trying to be to look at what we were trying to give us as information to the person that was answering, and giving it in a very nice way, in a very a good way, to not like push stuff, but actually let's help them. So this, I remember this one of the special things that we were paying attention for, really looking at this.
So, Jürgen, if I may, I think I remember one, as some people say, that you always remember how someone makes you feel, and right. So I remember one thing about this resource part was that it personalizes the recommendations, right, based on the need of the Scrum Master, or the gaps it sees in the skills, right? And in that sense, this tool acts as a curator, basically, of there's so much data that that's one thing that I remember. It struck that I saw that's the aha moment that I got. Oh yeah, this would save me a lot of time searching for this and that resource, and because it acts as the curator. So yeah.
No, I appreciate that. I think you told it that. Oh, sorry, Alan, please go.
I was just going to chime in that creating the survey items and the validation, and I mean that took a lot of collaboration, but like identifying the resources, I mean, as you mentioned, like we crowdsourced that from our diverse group of volunteers. That, I mean, we had lists upon lists of different resources of books and blog posts and YouTube videos and all kinds of things, and then dwindled those down to the most valuable items we thought for each of the survey statements. So as you can however many how many questions are there, Jürgen, now?
I think it's like 38. Well, we'll validate it very soon.
Yeah. Okay. Well, for for all 38 statements, yeah. I mean, we identified different resources that if that was an area you were lacking in, we gave the resources and all collaborated on that. So there were a lot of different things floating around there, and those things are all validated and really valuable for the people using the tool to get resources to help them in the areas they need.
I appreciate that, and I think that's one of the things that I think is valuable about this, because these were curated, like you said, Adil, by the community. So there's no sales part here. It's not like we're trying to push a certain, author or framework or way of thinking. We're literally saying, which are the resources that I would find useful if I was struggling with this particular topic, and those are the kind of resources we pointed out. So it's totally agnostic, which I think is really great. So what I thought we'd do now is actually show the tool, because one thing is to talk about it. Why don't we show it and actually have working software, as some Agile folks talk about, and see how this works, and then also point out some of the resources that you see. So what I'll do now is I will log into the tool here, and it's just going to show you how it works. Let me see if I can share my screen. It shouldn't take too long. Here we go. Here we go. So what you should see now is the Scrum Master personal improvement tool. So the moment you log in, after you take the survey, this is what you will see. So just to describe what you see on the screen here, you see a timeline at the very top here. You see a timeline, and this timeline is a way for you to go back and see how you performed when you took the survey at that point in time. So this is just a personal sort of reminder for yourself, if you want to have a look at your journey and kind of see how you were doing at that time. What you can also see is that you have a number of categories, and these are actually the categories that you see in the Scrum exams or in the tests that you take. We're looking at Scrum and Agile, Scrum theory, the values, team, the Scrum Master itself, Scrum events, and Scrum artifacts. And you can see everything is broken down. So if you go in here, you can start to see how you were performing in each and every one of these categories and also each particular question. So that's essentially how the dashboard looks. The survey itself is pretty simple. You take the survey, 38 questions, then we got that validated, Alan. And when you take the survey, it literally asks you questions that are all very targeted into behaviors and patterns and norms that we believe were important for being effective in the role of Scrum Master. So let's look at this one. The results of the team retrospective are actionable. Pretty simple question or statement, if you will, because none of these are actually questions. They're more like survey items that you react to. And then it's up to us to say, okay, I'm doing a retrospective. Are these actionable? Can we do something about these? So that you can answer that. And once you do that, you can move on. My team utilizes end user feedback. Okay. Then you can move on to that. You can see how that's going. And you can keep taking the survey, and it only asks very simple questions around how are you performing as a Scrum Master. Once you do it, you get the results. And of course, here come the recommendations. So in this case, there's a couple of things that stand out. And because of how we scored, we are then getting recommendations that are specific to where we may be deficient. So here's a number of different resources. If you like the resource, you can click on it. Let's see here. The 4 reasons to have a consistent sprint length. Let's look at that one. When I click on that, who are we getting here? Mike Cohn. Is there anyone who's more of an MVP than Mr. Mike Cohn? This is VIP material right here. So this is there, and it's free resource, of course. Other things you can look at, which kind of sprint length do you want? If I'm worrying about Scrum meeting cards, there's all sorts of different kind of resources depending on what is useful for you. This one seems like it's not active at the moment. So this one here is the one that kind of gives you more of an overview of how you can choose a sprint length. The point being is that all of these resources have been tested to be valid and not really salesy, because we didn't want to do this as a way to do salespeople other than coming some uploads to books and things like that, but nothing really high push in terms of the sales element. So I thought that was good. Now, here's one thing that I think is pretty cool. You can do this and see how you're doing over time. Once you do that, you can look at your graph, and here's where you as a Scrum Master can kind of measure yourself a little bit. Remember, this is personal. Nobody else can see this but yourself. And you can see how you've been doing as you've been taking these surveys. And you can break it down by the category. Like Scrum theory, for instance. How am I doing there? What about the Scrum team? How am I handling those artifacts? You can see this as you go through the survey. What you can do then is look at the World Index to look at how you're doing compared to everyone else who's taken this survey. Now, we're not doing this because we're trying to compete. This is not about I'm the best Scrum Master in the world. What it is a way for you to kind of look at yourself and say, you know what? I'm struggling with some of this stuff, but you know what? Others are too. And that's okay. Nobody's perfect at this all the time. It's like a professional fitness app, in a way. There's no reason to lie here. You're doing what you're doing as best as you can, and you can see others also doing what they can as they go through this. And you can start to see how you're working through all of these issues. So I think that was one thing that I thought was useful. The other thing that I liked was that there is a personal improvement backlog. And we try to make this very simple. It's not a Scrum board. It's not Jira. Literally what it is a list of resources that you thought were interesting that you want to look into. So if you look at what we had here earlier, a number of things were recommended for us from the tool. If I like some of these resources, I can just click on this button to the left here. And when I do that, the recommendation is automatically added to my little personal improvement backlog. If I go to my personal improvement backlog, I see a little list, which is simply just a checklist. If you want to move some things around and say, this is really useful, I'm going to move it up. You can move it up. This is not about being very formal. You can just organize this in a way that makes sense to you. But the point is, it keeps track of it. So if you want to do one of these resources, read them up, here they are for you. When you're done, click on the little checkbox, and it will all be moved to completed. Simple as that. So we don't have a whole lot of complexity here. It's pretty simple to do and done, basically. Why would we want to put everything in completed when you're done? Well, it could be good because if you're doing this, across the year and your manager comes along and says, so Jorgen, what have you been doing lately? Well, you can go back and say, well, part of the things I'm doing to improve myself are some of these things. And you can point out some of the resources you looked into and maybe recommend something to others. So it's just a record of things you've been doing and how you've been working with this overall. One more thing I want to point out, and this isn't used as much as I hoped it would be, but it is there for you. It's a community. Now, this particular community you see here is in staging, so this is not production environment. But we do have this quite active in the production environment as well. And this is a chance for you to ask questions to the Scrum community. And the way you do that, it's very simply, you can ask whatever question you want. How do I estimate, say, stories? And then you could talk about that here. Details. You can then either address this to the public, and when we say public, we mean everyone who's using this tool, or only to the experts. And the experts are people who are the original authors and people who are CSPs, people who have certified Scrum professionals. So they have a little bit more experience. And then you can also choose to be anonymous if you want to, or you can just choose to just have your name displayed. Either way, it's a quick way for you to ask a question and make sure that the community overall can look at this and respond to it. And and I've seen that this has been useful for a lot of people. Again, not as popular as I hoped it would be, but I definitely think it's one of those things that I think it's useful because, there's a lot of resources out there on LinkedIn and stuff like that. Nothing against those communities, but they're all ultimately being monitored and owned by large companies. They're mining all that data. It's not really private. This is private. We are not selling this data. This is just for us. So I think sometimes it's good for us to not share everything with the rest of the world. So I just want to let you know that that's there. The last thing I'll show you, and then after that, we'll go into some of the findings, is that you can also share your data with a coach. We said that this is private, and it is. It's private and confidential. Nobody can see this information other than you. But if you want to share this with someone you trust, a mentor, or maybe another coach, you can go here and click on coach sharing. And if you do that, you can add the name of that person. The only thing that is the requirement is that the person has to be registered on the site. That could be your CST, for instance, or someone who made you a Scrum Master. And then add that person. And what will happen once that person is added, that person will be able to see the results that you have. And they can then add additional backlog items or resources or recommendations to you and to your work so that you have that and you can have an ongoing conversation with that particular CST or coach. So in a nutshell, that's how the tool works. I thought I'll just close this now and say if there's any questions around it. I know, bet you it's a while since you've seen this, most of you. But what do you think? What your reaction, Adil? I see you're kind of nodding your head when you see this. Do you remember being part of this now? You might be on mute.
Of course.
So what I think what we might do now is actually go into some of the findings, because this is all great. We have a tool that's wonderful, but what is the tool telling us? If we go and look at all the data and start to analyze it, what are some of the things we're finding out? So what we did is we looked at the data and started to crunch it. And there's quite a bit of data here. Here's some things we found that I thought was interesting. If we look at the strengths, and what we're looking at here are where we have the highest average score, if you look at all the data sets that we have, and then where we have the lowest standard deviation. Standard deviation, just so you know, in general, it's just a quick way to give an impression of the level of coherence inside the data. If there is a very low standard deviation, it means that there's not a lot of divergence inside the data, so people agree with the statements. And what we see here is that these are identical. You know, the three top statements with the highest average and the lowest standard deviation are the same. So this not only means that people typically score high on this, they tend to agree with these statements, they also tend to be more or less cohesive when it comes to this. So what this is telling me, well, actually, why don't I ask what you guys think as you're looking at this? Alan, Renata, or Adil, what do you think when you see these results?
It just shows it's accurate. I mean, it's accurate, based on the alignment of the like we talked about the standard deviation down there and the ones that scored the highest. Less deviation and higher average means that it that it's accurate and that things are aligning the way they should be.
Yeah, and another thing it does, since these are the statements that the people who are taking the survey all agree with and tend to be in agreement with, I think it shows that Scrum Masters are good coaches. If you think of this behavior here, I have a good working relationship with my team. I encourage my team to improve continuously. The team interacts in a respectful way. Those are, I would say, sort of well, if not the most important, probably among the most important things that we expect a coach to do, isn't it? Working with people, continuously improving the way they work. These are things that these Scrum Masters are reporting that they're doing. So I think that's really inspiring, and it's really great to see that these are the things that we're actually performing the best in too. So I thought that was interesting. Now, there were some challenges too. So here's where we see some things that might be interesting. Now, let's go over here. And here's some things where we have the lowest scores. So these are the statements where the Scrum Masters overall were not scoring so high, and they tended to be disagreeing with each other quite a bit. So let's go through this and start with this one here. So the release plan and/or product roadmap are discussed during the sprint review. That statement not only has a relatively low average, it also has a large standard deviation. So this is saying that Scrum Masters here are saying that is not necessarily happening so often, or if it is definitely not consistent, because some are and some are not. Any comments that you make when you see this, Adil, when you look at that particular statement?
That it's not been practiced through. That's one of the trends probably as a collective we can address that. Why isn't it being practiced throughout the board? It's an emerging pattern, I'd say, right? And alignment. It's in another level. It also shows that teams are getting into the practice of Scrum, but alignment may be missing. The organizational alignment, right? Roadmap and release plan. These are organizational alignments. In many cases, we are seeing that the leaders usually are happy just when the team starts Scrum and they don't get involved in the process, right? So it points out to that kind of meta perspective as well.
I think you're completely right, and I think it shows that we might have a little bit of a tactical view. Like we look at the sprint and we look at the next sprint, but we don't really look at the overall product plan. We don't look at the vision. We just kind of focus on the short term. So I think that is one thing that I got out of this. Here's another one. Facilitation of the sprint retrospective is a shared responsibility. Not only a low score, but also a relatively large standard deviation, which again shows that there's a lot of inconsistencies. Interesting. I don't know if you get any thoughts when you think of that, Alan. It shows that we're not really able to share that kind of work with others, I guess.
Yeah. I think it shows that. To me, it shows that Scrum Masters feel like they need to do it every time, and they don't necessarily need to because that variation of who's facilitating can really help in engagement just by switching the person. Even though the Scrum Master may be the best person to do it, getting a different perspective and somebody else just facilitating the retro or whatever ceremony that they want to, that you can get some really good benefit out of that. So, but Scrum Masters a lot of time, feel like it's their job and they don't really know if they should share that responsibility or not. And you'll find that if you do that, you can find some pretty good facilitators within your team to share that responsibility.
I think you're completely right, Alan. That was exactly my thoughts as well. It's being a Scrum Master is a great job and all that, but at the end of the day, part of our job is to get out of a job. Our job is to sort of make ourselves superfluous so that others can do a lot of this work without us being there all the time. Now, here's some other interesting findings, I thought. And these are people who answered what we call neutrally. So if you think about a survey, you basically have 5 options. It's strongly agree all the way to strongly disagree. So there's 5 different answers. The answer in the middle says neither agree or disagree. So it's kind of the cop-out, if you will. And what I thought was interesting is that there's quite a few answers here that has a lot of neutrals. So the biggest one is my team limits work in progress. Now, I don't want to put anyone on the spot because it might be a tricky question, but what do you think is happening here? Because, if we think of lean, if we think of agile in general, we do know that limiting WIP is important. Anyone want to take this one? I'm thinking not. So then maybe I can give you my perspective, because I know I've been in this process myself, and I've had this challenge. What happens very often is that, management will keep saying, hey, let's keep doing this work, let's do more. Part of what we have to do is we start to say no. We have to say that, hey, we have a cadence, we have a capacity, there's so many stories we can take on. Sometimes we need a product owner who can stand up and say, sorry, we can only do this many stories this sprint. Why don't we do the next one for next time? Problem sometimes is that the product owner doesn't necessarily have the authority or maybe even the respect in the organization so that they can make those decisions, unfortunately. And I think that's part of the challenge here. Sometimes we just keep saying yes because we want to please the business, so to speak. We want to do the right things. And that's ultimately hurting us, because part of what we do as a Scrum team is to make sure that we have an even flow. We understand how to optimize for value delivery rather than just taking on work. So I think that was one of the things I thought was interesting. I think number 2, that goes to what you talked about earlier, Alan. It seems like, this is going to, like it says here, on my team, all Scrum events are facilitated effectively, even when I'm not present. A lot of people were like, I don't know about that. So I think that was one thing that was interesting. And then the last one here is also what we saw as one of the lower scores. So this is typical. People are worried about not just seeing what's happening now, but what's happening in the release plan and in the vision. So something we can definitely learn from that, I think. Very cool. Now, some of the summaries, and this is it's hard to read some of this, but if we summarize some of the findings that we found, I think we found that as a whole, when it comes to Scrum, when it comes to Scrum Masters, we're really good when it comes to personal relationships, continuous improvement, which is at the core of what we do anyway. We tend to do that well. At least that's how we perceive ourselves. So I think that's a very positive thing. As coaches, we do quite well. At least that's how we perceive it. And that's very positive. If we didn't, that would be very disturbing. No, when it comes to areas of improvement here, some of the things we found is that it might be smart for us as Scrum Masters to look beyond just the sprint and look beyond just the current 1 or 2 sprints and look beyond more to value and also to things that go beyond just the basics, because that's something we don't see so often with Scrum Masters. It tends to be focused on the very short term. So I think that's one thing. Other facilitation techniques and stuff like that, I think also can be very useful. And this was something I think Adil was saying when it comes to the variability. There also was clear that there was a lot of differences in the way people were doing things. That can be great, but it can also be a little bit inconsistent, especially if we're not clear on the value we provide, then that could be maybe a red flag. So some of the things that we can recommend, I think, from some of the findings, one thing is keep doing what you're doing when it comes to team dynamics and relationships. I think Scrum Masters in general are doing great there, and I think we should continue to work on that. I think that's one of those things we do that provides value to the organization. We are helping teams become high performing. And then look at things that have to do with, long-term planning, looking beyond just sprint reviews. And of course, we're not looking at, Gantt charts here, but we're saying, look at the vision also. So we're not just looking at the next sprint. Look at limiting WIP, not just at the team limit, but also at the organizational limit, because if there's anything that's going to create agility, it's organizational WIP that needs to be lowered. I think we can play a very important role there. And then help around with facilitation in general. I think we as coaches and Scrum Masters can do a lot of good things there. And then maybe try to get some best practices, or at least good practices, make sure that those are shared with other Scrum Masters. And I think this is where we as a community can help each other. It's one of the reasons we have these resources that we curate, is that we make sure people can share all sorts of different ways of working, but try to point to some of those things that we see work consistently so we can help each other. There is a global Scrum gathering coming up very soon. That could be a great place for people to share practices, and I know there's going to be some great talks there that is just there to help us as Scrum Masters improve. So that's some of those things that I think could be useful. I'm not going to go through this in great detail already. We know how to activate the Scrum Master PI now, I hope. But I do want to point out this element here, because I think this is very exciting. In about a month from now, there is a global Scrum gathering. Molly, do you want to say something about it? I know you have a lot of exciting things happening, so I think we should maybe note that specifically.
Yeah, no, we are so excited to have our global Scrum gathering coming up in New Orleans. It's going to be an amazing time. We have an incredible lineup of keynote speakers, of sessions, of sponsors. You can also come and hang out with Jorgen and I. We'll both be there hanging out in the main ballroom area where our sponsors will be. But it's going to be a really, really fun-packed few days, but also an incredibly educational, informative few days as well. It's also one of the most joyful connections of our community that I've experienced. It's such a great time seeing all the Agilists come together and celebrate all that's been done and all the fun potential for the future. So again, yeah, we'd love to have any of y'all join us in New Orleans next month. It's going to be a great time. I will drop the link to that website in the chat right now, but yeah, no, please come join us if you can.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I have a lot of memories from the Global Scrum Gathering. I know I met many of you. I think in 2018, when we announced, our collaborative partnership, that was in Minnesota. And I don't know if you were there, Alan. I think you were there. I think it was that year where there was was it 3 feet of snow or something? It was crazy.
Got a lot. Yeah, that's for sure. Yep.
So that was in 2018, and here we are in 2024. 6 years later, and now we're going to New Orleans. Don't think there'll be a lot of snow, but I think it'll be a wonderful event. So we'll be happy to demo the tool, to give you some prices, and help you implement the tool as well. So I think that'll be exciting. So I think that's about what we had in terms of content. We'll now be happy to take any questions if you have that. We are here. We have the original authors on tap here. So any questions you have for us at all, we are there to try to answer them.
Yeah, so we have a couple in the Q&A right now. So someone asked, do you have any recommendations on how often the survey should be done? After every week, after every sprint, quarterly, or even less frequently?
Really great question. Before, I want to open it up to any of the authors here if you want to take it. I have my opinion, certainly, but I'd love to hear what you guys think.
I can share mine. I think weekly is too short. So basically what I do is I try to set a few goals that I want to achieve. And then after this, I do it again. So it's more like based on what is my expectation with what I want to improve, then actually create a cadence by month or yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's kind of what I've been doing too. I've been trying to do it every 2 to 3 sprints. And then as I start to do this, I notice that my personal improvement backlog increases. So I have to sometimes just kind of say, okay, Jorgen, before you start putting on more of these, let's just finish some of that, keep that WIP limit low, and then I move on again. So it kind of varies a little bit. But I think the short answer is, to your question, do it in a way that makes sense to you. think of it as a professional fitness app, and use it in a way that makes sense to you. Don't overdo it, but as long as it gives you useful information, that's the idea we're trying to go for. Great question.
All right. On the general topic about retrospective facilitation, this is a learned skill. While I'm keen to pass Scrum and Scrum Master knowledge to anyone who shows an interest in learning it, isn't trying to get the team to run their own retros and or pass the facilitation responsibility around likely to result in low quality retros and missed opportunities to improve.
Okay, I certainly have an answer to that, but I want to open it up. Adil, is this something you want to talk about a little bit?
Yeah, I know we have a tendency to consider the team as our baby, but as like any baby, we have to, at one point, start letting it take some risks, and growing opportunities. So I think it's not an anti-pattern to let it go to some extent and be there when needed.
Yeah, and I think your point is well taken. I don't think what the question is getting to is to say, okay, I'm just gonna let this let whatever happens without giving or at least providing some examples of how this can be done. Before, because you're completely right. Being an effective facilitator and running a retrospective is a learned skill, and there's some great resources, by the way, in the tool with Diana Larson, Esther Derby, for instance. But yeah, Adil is right. At one point, there is something to be said for not having it perfect, and actually let people try and fail themselves. They learn a lot from that, and that could be really useful for the team also. So yeah, it's uncomfortable today.
One additional thing Jürgen forgot to mention is that in my personal experience, what worked in that respect when giving more responsibility to the team is setting some guardrails, so that in retro you have to get at 1 to 3 action items at the end, like that kind of like what are the must-haves versus what you can be a little lax on. So setting those first, of course, through demonstration, and then letting them do it. That helps.
I think that's great advice. Guardrails. Yep. Excellent. Thank you. Anything else, Molly?
Yeah. Do you recommend this more as an individual journey, or do you recommend that all the Scrum Masters / coaches of the tribe take up collectively?
That's a good one. I like that. Well, I'd love to hear what yours experience is too. And Alan, do you want to speak to that, or Renata? Do you have any opinions about that? Should this be done individually, or do you want it to be more of a kind of a collective experience?
I mean, it is a personal improvement tool, right? So I think, individually what you're doing is definitely important. But, if you have a tribe or a team of Scrum Masters that are all, working across different teams, the collaboration they can have on this and each of them taking it and then discussing the things together of what they're lacking, what they're, strong in, those things would really foster some really good conversation among the team. And then they can, then that's just going to spark more conversation on how, they're working in different ways across their teams and things like that. So, yeah, like I said, I think the individual surveys are on an individual basis, but then, sharing that across the team would be fantastic.
Yeah, I love that. Renata, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I think Alan says everything.
Last one. Perfect. Great, Molly.
All right. Second, I'm checking all the new questions. So somebody asked, and I'm wondering if there's kind of a context to this, but they've asked if any of y'all have used Team Foundation Server, aka Azure DevOps.
Yeah, I think we're talking about a specific tool.
Yes.
Yeah,
So if they want
I've used it.
context to that, that would be great. But another question, what's your viewpoint about considering the traditional 3 questions, and in brackets it says yesterday/today/impediments in daily Scrum and anti-pattern? Some Agilists are publishing this point of view, although this was there in the 2017 version of the Scrum Guide.
So now we're getting into sort of controversial waters. This could be you can really get in trouble here. So I don't know. First, let me ask you guys if you have any strong opinions about this. I certainly don't want to.
Yeah,
take away.
I mean,
Yeah,
this can be debated many times, right? And there's plenty. I think in the tool even there's probably some resources that are listed on stand-ups, right? And what things you can do that are aside from the just stock 3 questions that originally were created. But those are things that I feel like you have to figure out. Those 3 questions sometimes work for some teams if you're getting the team synchronization out of your stand-up, and if they're not working, then there's a lot of variation to that. That there's been many blogs and many posts and many things debated around this topic that you got to find what ultimately works for your team. So there's not like I don't think there's a silver bullet for it. You just got to try some things out. Some of them may not work, but you'll find some things that work for your team as you go forward. So that's what I would say.
I think that's a wonderful answer. Please, go ahead, Adil.
I'd stick my head out a little bit on this one. I don't mind getting bashed a little bit, but I think I've seen this pattern being weaponized by more command and control type project management type stuff, and sometimes may create a lot of anxiety in the team, right? That okay, I'm now being I have to report on a micromanaged level, right? So one good thing I have seen when we can revolve the conversation around the sprint outcomes, sprint goals, and what that individual member has committed toward that goal, and if there is any blocker or anything like that. So that takes the level of conversation a little bit up, above the micromanagement level, in my experience.
I like that, and the way I look at this is, if you think about the whole point of doing scrums is to synchronize the team's work. I mean, that is the point. And if that happens through those 3 questions, or through a modification of those 3 questions, or maybe even through osmosis, because people have been working together so long so they don't even have to ask the questions, I think that's fine. As long as teams are able to synchronize their work in a daily little quick check-in, I think that's the point. The questions themselves is just a way for us to help us get there. And then as we get more mature, I think it more or less happens automatically without even asking the questions, which is great in my opinion. But good question. Yeah. Controversial, but good. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, just adding a small point of view from my side, experience. For me, it depends on the teams that I'm working with. With a few teams, it helps to synchronize, inspect, and adapt. With other, it doesn't. It's more like a status report thing. And when this happens, I just change the questions. So instead of using those, let's use something else. As long as you were saying, Jürgen, we achieve the main objective. Because the main objective is not the question, but the synchronization.
Makes total sense. Thank you. Good question. Molly, what do you got for us?
All right, we have one more question in the attendee chat that I'll throw out there. What is your opinion of using MVP as a target? I am constantly pushing back on my executive peers that MVP is not an end state solution. What documentation do you have that can help qualify what MVP?
Okay, so now this is getting into well, Adil, before you didn't mind going into some controversial waters. Do you want to do this again, or?
I zoned out for the crucial 15 seconds. Can you please repeat the question?
Yes. Second, what is your opinion of using MVP as a target? I am constantly pushing back on my executive peers that MVP is not an end state solution. What documentation do you have that can help qualify what an MVP is or is not?
Great. So this is. Should I take it, Jürgen?
You feel free. I will also. I'll back you. I'll give you some of my opinion too, so you're not alone.
So I actually I run a venture studio now, and like MVP, I think Lean Startup popularized the term, and then you never get out of MVPs, and MVP is just a way of saying that what minimum viable product will help you validate or invalidate some hypothesis. And that when you say minimum viable product, it can be also a subset of or a feature of a product, right? So you can be in that MVP mode forever, even when your product has been released, right? So it depends on for startups, it will take a completely different meaning, though, if you do not have a product. So it depends on where in product life cycle you are.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that one of the main objectives again of an MVP is learning. I mean, it's trying to understand that is what we are trying to create here useful, meaningful? Is it valuable? Are people willing to pay for it? Does it work the way we expected it to? It's a learning tool. And so the person is asking, is it an end state? No, I think Adil already answered it. It's definitely not an end state. It's a continuous process. And MVPs are not just, okay, there's one MVP, that's it, we're done. No, I don't think that's the purpose of it. We have an iteration perhaps that has an MVP as a result, and then we continue iterations with an enhanced version of that MVP to test something different. And that's all legitimate, I think, as part of learning in Scrum and other ways of working. Good, Molly. I think that was it. Did we cover most of the questions?
I think we covered most of the questions. There are a few more that I'll work on responding to individually, but I think we are all set. So thank you so much to our incredible hosts for all the wonderful historical context and how they built the tool and how to use it. Such amazing information. We're so excited that our members have access to this. And thank you to everybody who joined us today for this webinar to learn more about this tool. We hope you add it to your suite of tools that help you on your Scrum Master or Agile journey. We will send an email tomorrow with a link to the on-demand recording of this webinar, which should have the corrected slide deck as that link was broken today. I'm sorry for that. We'll also include a link to auto-claim your Scrum Education unit for attending this event. So just make sure to click on that link, sign into your dashboard, and you will automatically be credited with 1 SEU for attending this. And then one more final thing, as soon as we close the webinar, a survey will pop up with 3 short questions just asking about your experience. We would really appreciate if you took just a couple seconds to answer those questions for us so we can continue to build webinars that help you on your educational journey. So with that said, thank you again for attending, and we will see you at our next webinar.